On today's episode of the Guild of Dads podcast, I'm joined by Sara Davison, also known as the Divorce Coach. Sara and I discuss why changing the dynamic of your relationship can heal your relationship even when seemingly impossible and headed towards divorce. We also discuss how to build self-reliance and independence in the aftermath of separation and divorce, and the importance of being fully independent in your own self-identity before embarking upon another serious relationship or even second marriage. Hi, I'm Joe Horton, and this is Guild of Dads. Hey, you over there. Yeah, I can see you. Come over. Sit down and join me as I'm about to have a conversation about you. A conversation about what it means to be a dad, a role model, and to live a life of meaning. About your physical health, how you look after yourself, contribute to the world around you, and raise our next generation. A conversation that will shape the vision you have for yourself. Forever. Thanks for joining me today on Guild of Dads, the podcast for dads looking to expand and level up their knowledge in all areas of being a father. Tackling some of the most relevant subjects applicable to men, the conversations we have will be thought-provoking, inspirational, and make you laugh and possibly even cry. Covering everything from relationships to health to divorce and death, if it's something you may face as a dad, we've got it covered. I hear a lot from dads that they have all the material things that should be making them happy in 2020, but that there is something lacking. And on Guild of Dads, we're looking to give you all the information you need to really start thinking about a vision for yourself going forward, and one on which you can take action and find meaning. This is a much needed conversation right now, as many dads feel lost and are hungry for information to make some much needed changes and improvements. If that's you, then Guild of Dads is the place for you. Sara Davison is best known as a divorce coach and a best-selling author of the book Uncoupling: How to Survive and Thrive After Breakup and Divorce. She has 20 years experience of coaching and has been through divorce herself, and now uses the skills she has learned to help others. She's also the creator of breakup recovery retreats, which have been described as transformational. Sara has featured in numerous print and TV media such as Stella, The Daily Mail, The Sun, The Telegraph, The Times, Marie Claire, and TV3's Heartbreak Hotel. And now for my conversation with Sara. Sara, welcome to the Guild of Dads podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you along speaking to us today. And we're going to be speaking about something which is not always spoken about that much amongst certainly the dads community, but I know it's something that a lot of dads go through and causes them a massive amount of turmoil, and that is the subject of divorce.
Absolutely. Well, 42% of marriages in the UK end in divorce, so there is a lot of it around. But the good news is it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. It just depends how you cope with it, and that's what we're going to talk about, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. When people are first going through the divorce, it won't have happened in isolation. It will be a surprise to the people around them, because 9 times out of 10, people are trying to deal with this stuff behind kind of closed doors, and typically maybe family / friends may not know the kind of full picture or just how bad things are. But obviously when it actually kind of is announced that it's going to happen, everyone is all of a sudden involved, and I would imagine there's a whole raft of emotions that kind of come with that. What are people typically going through in those first, few days and weeks when the kind of bomb hits, so to speak?
Well, it's interesting because usually one partner is a little bit further ahead than the other. So, for example, if it's you that's decided to leave, you've probably been working at this for quite a long time. And it might be that you've been discussing it with your partner behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So maybe you tried to fix things, maybe you talked about things. maybe your partner hasn't been that willing to make many changes, so you've been doing it on your own. But it might, well, I usually see in my coaching clinic when people come to me in this situation that one of them is much further ahead than the other. So usually the person that's decided to say, look, I've had enough, I can't take this anymore, we've got to go our separate ways, they're a little bit further ahead than the other person. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So that's where the bombshell comes, or when people sort of say, gosh, I didn't know, and she's just announced she's leaving me. Yeah, that can be tough. Or, I'm going to tell her tomorrow I'm leaving, but actually consciously be aware of, are they on the same page as you? And if not, that's going to have quite a big effect. So what I would say is try and have a communication before you get to that point if you can, because you can save marriages. You can improve relationships just by improving the way you communicate with each other. And I mean, there's so many different ways we communicate. There's the 5 languages of love. I'm sure, Joe, you've heard of that, right? Where Gary Chapman created this concept where sometimes we communicate with each other, but we're talking different languages. So, for example, he says there's 5 different languages of love. One is, do you know these, Joe?
Yeah.
Should I test you? So one is words of appreciation. So saying, you look nice, darling, or I love you, something that is actually a verbal thing. Second one is physical touch. So holding hands when you're walking down the road, or giving someone a cuddle. If that's how you show your love for them, that's your language of love. Then it might be acts of service, which is quite common, more generally with men, actually. So that could be making breakfast in bed on a Sunday, or washing the car, or taking the dogs for a walk, or putting the washing on, or whatever. Then there is quality time. So if you show your love if you feel loved by being around your partner, without phones, without kids, just you and them. And then there's gifts. So, it doesn't have to be the latest Prada handbag, although it can be nice, but it's just something that is thoughtful, or, that you've just picked up on the way home because it's going to make you smile. So, there's different ways we show our love, but the challenge is, if you're in a relationship with someone and it's on the rocks, it probably is that you're talking different languages. So, for example, maybe you're showing, for example, your wife how much you love her by cleaning the car on a Sunday morning, but to her, she's like, well, of course he's cleaning the car. It doesn't make me feel loved. I want him to tell me. Maybe that isn't something you feel comfortable doing. So there's a disconnect. Even though you both have feelings and love each other, you're not communicating in the right way. So that can cause the downfall of a relationship. So it's important to think about these things before you make that announcement, or before it gets to the point where your partner turns around and says, I've had enough. Because if you're just more aware of those things, you can take control and then do something differently. You can communicate better. You can then start trying to say you love them more, maybe if that's what they need to hear. Or they can start to realize that when you're cleaning the car, it actually does mean you care. So it changes the dynamic of the relationship. Once that starts to shift, you can save it. You can turn things around. So, I mean, that's just one thing you can do to do it, but that is something that's important. So that, the question you asked me was what happens when you get that announcement? Well, then it is known as the second most traumatic experience we go through after the death of a loved one. So divorce is a tough, traumatic experience, and it is never going to be a walk in the park. However amicable it is, there will always be difficulties when you come to splitting up finances and custody of the kids, and just 2 lives that have been entwined. So it does cause a lot of trauma. So it's something that you absolutely have to think very carefully about, and in my opinion, do everything you can to see if there's a way that you can save it, turn it around. Maybe you can make it even better. And if you can't, well, then at least and you've tried, so you leave with no regrets, which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. And how much of part of that process do you find is wrapped up in the actual identity? Because obviously before you get married, you have separate identities. Then when you get married, you still have separate identities, but they kind of blend together, so to speak. And then obviously as you reach that point where you can see that there's a prospect that a relationship could end, then you're having to kind of detach your identities a little bit. That's kind of almost a double-edged sword, because I've seen it with some guys who, in a lot of cases, where there is that kind of detachment of identities. Sometimes when they feel that the relationship has actually reached a point where it's kind of going to end, where they are able to 100% kind of begin to focus on themselves, that bizarrely, and this is kind of a really weird thing for people, and particularly guys, to get their head round, that once they start focusing on themselves and they're not hanging on every word of their partners, stuff starts to improve, because they're not trying to creep, they're not trying to crawl, they're not trying to put pressure on their partner to fix things. It almost becomes a little bit more organic. They still have to do the whole love languages thing and all the other good stuff that comes with that, but quite often as they begin to kind of work on themselves, it kind of begins to all of a sudden resurrect the relationship in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you start to look at yourself and not be so dependent on your partner, it frees up lots of opportunities. Quite often, it is normal to be codependent in a relationship. I mean, you have to be, right? You take the bins out and I'll do this. It kind of is a two-way street. It has to be give and take. In fact, I was in a taxi yesterday in London, and there was one of those cabbies who just wanted to talk. And I was like, I've got loads of work to do. And he's like, I want to talk. And he was saying that he'd been married for 45 years. And I was like, so I always ask the question, so what's the secret then? What's the secret? And he said, it's give and take. He said, you've got to give and take. And that's true. You do have to give and take. And that's how relationships work. So there's a difference between, you prefer, I don't know, Chinese takeaways. She prefers Indian, but you have more Indian because it's easier. She likes it. It makes her happy. Okay, that's flexibility. But where flexibility and compromises become sacrifices, that's the difference. That's the turning point where suddenly it starts to have a long-term effect, maybe on your confidence, on your happiness, on your self-esteem. Because if you've always got to self-check against someone, if you're losing those self-reliance muscles where you make decisions on your own, it can make you, it can have long-lasting consequences on you as a person. So if you do come to break up and you've been in one of those slightly toxic relationships where you've been walking on eggshells or you haven't been free to make your own decisions, that is a bit of a learning curve to get through, because you've suddenly got to be able to start to build that self-reliance muscle. And the quickest way to do that is, instead of running to people to ask for answers, which is what I see a lot of my clients in the early days doing, like, oh, what do I do now? How do I do this? Is to build a breakup support team around you, people that can do the things that you're not great at, so that you can get that advice and support. But also ask yourself first, before you pick up the phone and ask your mate, like, okay, well, what do I think I should do in this situation? What's the best way to get a solution to this? And then at least you're training yourself to think for yourself. Still pick up the phone and ask a friend if you need that sense check, or an expert in whatever it is that you need help with. But start to build that self-reliance yourself, because that's the fastest way to start to build your confidence back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you were just talking about, I just had a kind of insight as you were talking about there, about kind of when things are going astray and stuff. I think an important point to make there, particularly when you've got kids, is that sometimes you're just absolutely exhausted. Both of you are exhausted, and trying to think straight and trying to resolve stuff when you're both, particularly with very young children, when you're both absolutely exhausted, is a hard thing in itself. And it's recognizing that you need maybe some time out time, your partner needs some time out time. And when I say time out time, I don't mean like they're in another room and you're in this room. It means letting them go to the gym for a couple of hours and not ringing them when they're at the gym, so they're 100% off duty. And the same for you. So you have that space and time to think, rather than kind of being in each other's pockets all the time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think as human beings, we need time on our own. We do need time to recharge. And whether that's just sort of going for a walk, going to the gym, just doing something we love, reading a book, you just need a bit of downtime rather than being constantly interrupted, because you have so many pressures as a parent and working. Usually you might be an employee or employer. You've got kids, you're a brother, you're a dad, you're a mother, you're a sister. We've all got all these multiple roles we play, and sometimes you just need to be you, like without the pressures and the responsibilities, just you, because that's what recharges our batteries. And quite often when I see clients, they say, yeah, but that feels selfish. Actually feels selfish because I've got a list of things that she wants me to do or he wants me to do, and if I just sit down and she's going to come in and go, you need to be doing this, how can you be reading a book? Oh, I haven't got time to read a book. So again, it's important to do it, but you've got to kind of work together, because if you suddenly say, this is my me time, feet up, read a book, it's going to cause problems. So you need to communicate. Say, look, you need time. I need time. What do you want to do? Okay, and I want to do this. So can we agree, even if it's 15 minutes a week, that I get to do this and you get to do your thing, and this is the rules. So I think it's a great idea, but you've got to make sure you're communicating with your partner, not just saying, no, this is my me time. I heard on a podcast, I've got to go do this, so sorry.
But that comes, I mean, I'm not going to go too much off on the tangent on this, but that comes back to agreeing what your roles are as well, doesn't it? So, okay, you're doing this, I'm doing this is the time for doing this, and having that kind of clearly defined so that there's not that conflict over, hang on a minute, I thought you were meant to be doing this when I'm doing. And then it just all goes to pot, and then you kind of then there's the narkiness, and then there's kind of resentment and all that kind of good stuff. It comes
down to communication, I think. Yeah. It does come down to communication. And even when you're going through a breakup, I think if you're about to go through a breakup and it's as amicable as it can be at this point, the best thing to do is just to set some ground rules, because I can tell you the most amicable of breakups and divorces get heated when you start talking about finances and children and dating other people. It can all go off like a volcano at a second's notice. So actually, if you get a chance while it's amicable to set some ground rules, and they would be, we're going to be kind to each other and we're going to be respectful, because kindness and respect are two things that are lacking in a lot of divorces, and it needs to be both parties. If one person can do it with the best intent, and I would say always do the right thing, even if your ex isn't doing that. But in order for it to be the best it can be, you both need to be doing that. You both need to be respectful. You both need to be kind and be thinking, look, it is still give and take. It is still, okay, well, you can have the painting and I'll have the piano. It has to be give and take. When it gets to like this and no one's budging, that's when it gets really difficult. And it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So that's important to bear in mind.
Yeah. And I think the other point as well, just touching on what you've just said, is the more you can keep it amicable as well, the more you can agree stuff without the need to have lawyers involved and to have courts involved, because if you can agree stuff yourself, then there is, with the exception of actually getting your divorce paperwork sorted, there is very little need to have the courts involved in the contacts and finances if you can agree it yourself. So it's in your long-term financial interest to try and agree it yourself, as well as just the interest of the children being amicable and stuff. So there is another reason why it's a good idea to keep things amicable as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the costs can spiral out of all control. And the important thing is to work out what you want and to work out what is fair. And you might need legal advice to work out what that is, because, if you've not been divorced before, you maybe don't know the law so well. So it's all right to get the legal advice to understand what is fair. And then hopefully you can agree that between the two of you. And, if you can, that's great. If you can't, well, then, still be kind and respectful throughout that process as much as you can be, because, ultimately at the end of it, the financial settlement will be done, and you guys will have to, if you don't have kids, you may never have to see each other again. If you do, then that's important, isn't it? So you've got to manage that relationship and nurture it, knowing that, and that's something you can communicate about up front. Look, even if it gets tough, let's just say we'll get through it, we'll be as kind as we can, but even if the wheels fall off, we're still going to come back together at the end of this, and our goal is to, co-parent together happily, or, get on as friends, and be amicable.
Yeah. And like we touched upon this briefly as well, in the kind of immediate aftermath, when the kind of decisions have been made, what is usually the kind of the biggest, the real biggie that kind of causes the most turmoil for people? Is it the children or the finances, or is it just the whole thing just, hitting them at once sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's about understanding each other, because everyone's different. So, for example, I don't know, say, for example, one person has worked all their life and the other person hasn't so much. Then obviously that can cause tensions when it comes to dividing the pot 50-50, which is UK law. And, some mothers are super attached to their kids maybe, and that they're going to find that hard, especially if it wasn't their decision to leave. And I think, you've got to understand that. And if you can understand where your ex is coming from, because you know them, then maybe there's a way of doing it, rather than saying, because their fear therefore will be, they're going to take all my money, or they're going to take my child away. So how about doing it in a way where, for example, with the child, you could say, look, obviously I want to spend time with them, but you can FaceTime them. And, if you want me to bring them back a bit early for the first couple of times, I will, or you can call me, or make it as easy as possible by understanding your ex, rather than saying, I'm entitled to this, that's what I need. It's about finding ways to do it in a gentle way. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to be draconian. You can do it in a way that's, and saying, look, I'm going to support you financially, but obviously life's going to change for both of us. So let's talk about how we can do that in a way that doesn't, is give and take for both of us.
Yeah.
So there are ways of doing it. So I don't know if you've seen The Marriage Story, which is one of the most horrific films I've ever seen on Netflix. It's about a couple that were relatively amicable with the son. They decided to split, and then they got lawyers in and they literally ripped them apart. And I know a lot of family lawyers have said, well, that's just ridiculous. My experience is pretty much how it goes. So, I think you've got to be, not all lawyers, but some of them can make things a lot worse. So picking your lawyer is really important, because there are some lawyers that are pit bulls. And if you take them on as your law firm, you're going to get an aggressive, feisty lawyer who's going to send very, difficult, threatening, bullying letters in some cases. And then if you choose an amicable lawyer, there's some that are designed just to help you mediate and go through it in a very amicable way, then that sets the tone. So also you've got to think very carefully about who you're instructing if you are going to take legal advice.
Yeah. And an actual fact, what I'm going to give a bit of advanced disclosure to listeners. I did legal training when I was probably about 15, 20 years ago. So I do have a little bit of knowledge about how this works. And what I'll do, Sara, is I know I'm sure there is an organisation, I think it was the Solicitors Family Law Association, it could be, I'll double check it, but I'll link it up in the show notes for anyone that's listening, because I'm pretty sure that there is a body which has accredited family lawyers. So what you're getting is someone that is experienced in a more conciliatory way of doing things rather than an adversarial way of doing things, which, as Sara just said, can exacerbate things a lot, because what happens is it just inflames the situation and is hell-bent on making more fees rather than actually coming to an agreement which is helpful for everyone. So I'll do my little bit of research and I'll link that up so people have got that. One thing I was going to mention as well is, how much do outside forces play a part in this? Because obviously people are going to have their own view of how they want to do things, but then they might have a friend or whatever who's saying to them, oh, I got divorced, you want to show them who's boss, and you don't want to do this, and you don't want to. Does that tend to inflame stuff as well? Because we've all been in that situation where you've got a friend in your ears going, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do this, and you're just like, this is it's too much, and then you end up making a rash decision.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in my clinic just before Christmas, I had a woman turn up for a first session, and she said, her partner had left and gone off with someone and moved in, and she knew that he had a girlfriend, and her best friend had turned up with a big pair of shears, and she said, come on, let's go upstairs and let's get his stuff and chop it all up. And then she said, I've got bin bags in the back. She said she was quite pleased with herself. I'm going to take it all around to his house and just dump it now outside the flat and your girlfriend can see it. And this is one of her good friends that means well, but she's so emotionally engaged with it that she's giving advice that is not, positive for the long-term consequences of those actions. So it's about choosing who you listen to carefully, because there's going to be a lot of people that are emotionally involved in your breakup. Maybe it's their, daughter-in-law or son-in-law or really good friend, or maybe they trusted them and then they've done something to you and they feel bad. Maybe they introduced you. So everyone has their own stuff they're going to put on your situation. So whilst it's nice to be around people that are saying, yeah, she was really mean to you, she was unkind, that helps. But actually, if you're going to take some action off the back of it, you've got to really think carefully and make sure that you're getting the best expert advice. And if you're going to choose a friend to listen to, choose someone who's not so emotionally involved in your story, someone that you respect, that is going to have your best interest in the long term at heart.
Yeah. And I think for what I take from that is that when you're deciding on a course of action, it's got to be, what is the end result of this? Where is this going? What is the end result of what I'm going to embark upon right now going to be? Because obviously, if you're going to decide that you're going to, cut up all your ex-wife or ex-husband's clothes, the end result of that is just going to be more contention, more emotion, more stress, rather than kind of taking a lot more again conciliatory way of doing things, sort of thing. And I know it's hard, and people from a legal background all hear about the term reasonableness. And I know when I used to be working in the law, it was I would always be speaking to clients in terms of, look, what your behaviour may in the future at some point be viewed by a courtroom, and you want the court to be looking at your behaviour and saying, actually, here is a reasonable dad or a reasonable mum that cares for their kids, and he's working and he's doing stuff in their best interests, rather than someone who's just like a car crash moving from catastrophe to catastrophe and just looks like someone that you really do not want to award anything in their favour whatsoever. And I've seen that happen where, I've seen a dad sitting in court before, and they've been exemplary. They've turned up for contact on time. They've, been sort of outstanding. And there's been a mum on the other side who has just been placing so many difficulties in their way at every single step. And the judge has been highly commendable of the father. But conversely, I've seen it the other way around as well. So, it goes both ways. But the point is your behaviour could well be judged at some point in the future if you want to go down the silly route, so to speak. So, do you want to get involved with a community of other dads who are looking to develop themselves? To continue the conversations we have here on this podcast in a place for dads only that fosters brotherhood, camaraderie and personal growth? Then we have just the place for you. At the Guild of Dads Facebook group, you can connect with other dads on a similar journey, share experiences, offer support and seek support. Most of all, you can get some accountability in your own journey and get involved with the discussions and topics that every dad faces. So look us up on Facebook, join up and get involved with the discussion. Looking forward to seeing you in the Guild so you can start your journey with us today.
Well, that's why my motto is always do the right thing. And that's not always the easy thing. In fact, it's very likely to be the hardest thing. But do the right thing. Think about it. Is this the right thing? It might feel good. It might feel really good to go and get the shears out and chop up all her clothes or whatever. But is it the right thing to do? No. So ultimately, it's about learning to control your emotions, I suppose, and not just go with what's happening in the moment. You've got to take a step back, breathe, think, okay, now I feel like that. Let me sleep on it, or let me give it 5 minutes, or let me rewatch a podcast or something just to take my mind off it. And then, okay, now how do I feel? Okay, I'm still upset. I'm still pissed off. Yeah, but actually, this isn't the way to vent it. I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go for a run, or whatever you do to get rid of that aggression. You've got to find better coping strategies that can distract you, whether it's phoning your mates and going out, whether it's 5-star jumps just to instantly change your mood. Something, you've got to find things that are going to change your state very quickly, so that gives you a bit of perspective. And unfortunately, there is no magic wand to take away all the pain, because you're human and breakups are really tough. And whether you want it or not, it can throw all sorts of curveballs on your life, like lifestyle, financial pressures, not seeing your kids as much as you might want to. And it's about how do you cope with that? How do you as a human being step up, and who do you want to become in life? Do you want to be the person that's moaning about your breakup, making things difficult, dragging your feet? Or do you want to be the person that says, you know what, sometimes life doesn't work out the way you want it to, but actually that's okay. And this, as a parent, is a great lesson to teach any child that, divorce, people say, oh gosh, divorce damages kids. I'm not a believer of that. It can, absolutely, but it depends on the parents. And if the parents are at least one parent is doing the right thing and showing the right way to do things, and that, yes, sometimes the wheels fall off and you don't get the fairy tale ending that you dreamed for, you wanted, you hoped for. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But actually what can happen is, yes, I felt sad. Yes, as a parent, you feel sad, you go through difficulties. But what did mummy or daddy do? Well, they dusted themselves down, they picked themselves up, and they went on and created a life where they're even happier. So what does that child learn? Your child is learning then that okay, sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to. You won't get into college. Someone will lie to you. Someone will let you down. Someone will betray your trust. But that doesn't mean that's the end of the world. You can regroup. You can get up and you can carry on, because I saw dad do it. I saw mum do it. That is a valuable life lesson for children in a day and age where mental health is such a crisis point right now, where suicide rates for teenagers is going through the roof because they think, oh, well, life hasn't worked out. Like these Love Island kids, life hasn't worked out the way I wanted it. I've got some money pressures, or I didn't get this show that I wanted, or they're doing better than me. Okay, well, there's no point living anymore. But that, if you've got a parental role model that is showing you that sometimes life is really tough, that you dig deep, you get up and you keep going, that's the important bit. That's the bit that you can give your kid a life lesson that you as a role model, as the parent, by your actions can show them. Even if it's, well, what are you doing? I'm doing 5-star jumps. Why, Daddy? Well, because I feel sad today. Because you acknowledged it. You don't stuff it. You don't hide it. You don't go out drinking. I mean, you can, but it's not the healthy way to go. But I'm doing 5-star jumps. Why? Because it makes me feel happy. It changes my mood. Try it. And you'll be so surprised. Like my son came home when he was 6. So I got divorced when my son was 1. I had to do a lot of star jumps in the first few years of that breakup. It was a tough breakup.
How many? How many exactly would you say? Yeah,
well, I was like 20 stone when I started. But I find it a really effective technique because it just completely jars you. You can't necessarily do it on the train, but if you're at home and you're having a bad moment, you can do it. And my son knew that I used to do star jumps. And so he was at school one day and he came home, he was 6, and he said, Mummy, I was playing with Charlie today in the playground and we were playing It, which is the game of the moment. And he said, and then Charlie fell over and he started crying. He hurt his knee and he didn't want to play. And I said, Charlie, come on. He goes, no, I feel sad. I don't want to play. He said, well, you feel sad? Well, then do the thing to cheer you up. And Charlie said, what? What is that? And my son turned to him and said, put your chin up, put a big smile on your face. And if that doesn't work, 5-star jumps. And my son turned to me and goes, Mummy, he didn't even know that. And I was like, yeah, kind of unusual with the old technique. And he said, so he stood up and he did it. And he goes, oh, it really works. And my son was like, of course it works. Come on. He said, and then he played me for the rest of the day, Mummy. But Charlie didn't even know that. And I was like, it's really interesting what you don't know they're absorbing as kids because they pick up on everything. Yeah. So instead of just, trying to shield them from it, go, I'm not sad, I'm fine, I'm happy. When a kid knows you're not really happy, the best thing to do is acknowledge, yes, sometimes I feel sad, but when I feel sad, and then you give them the coping technique so they can use it. Or I put a smile on my face, or I play this music, or I do a little funny dance, or I pull a face, or 5-star jumps. And all of a sudden you find that they're doing it because they've seen you do it and they go, oh, that's what you do. So as a young child, you're learning all this, which would be very useful for most adults, right? If we knew all this when we were kids, we could dial down our negative emotions in a heartbeat. We'd be in a much stronger position, I think. Yeah. So it is a gift if you can turn it as a parent. Divorce can be an incredibly valuable life lesson for children that, even when things don't work out, it's okay and you can turn it around.
Yeah, it's installing that resilience and that ability to see the positive in a negative situation. And I think that I've seen this a few times with I think that sometimes dads find it difficult to picture in their head they need a kind of frame of reference. And I've noticed quite a few dads who are kind of on second marriages. They've said to me, well, what I did was I looked at it as version 1 or marriage 1, marriage 2, but it was kind of like an upgrade to their operating system. So the way they looked at it was that, okay, things haven't worked out well here. I did make mistakes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to build an independent life for myself. I'm going to find out what interests me so that I'm not kind of dependent on someone else. And then what I'm going to do is when I'm ready, if and when, then somebody will come into my life and I will be independent, but I'll be on a lot more level footing and a lot more kind of straight than I was the first time round. And the way they kind of visualize this is kind of marriage point 1, marriage point 2 sort of thing. So on the basis that things didn't work out, but I'm going to make damn sure that I'm going to get myself straight, so that next person that comes along, I'm going to be a real catch. And that's not from a point of view of saying I'm just going to make myself so great for the next person to come along. It's actually coming from a point of view of I'm going to make myself independently happy, so that when someone comes in, they are coming in as an addition to that, rather than I'm dependent on that person coming into my life.
Yeah.
And it's a subtle difference. And I know a lot of guys who have kind of gone into marriage point 2, kind of with that mindset carrying through. And in actual fact, they're enjoying absolutely smashing second marriages as a result, because it's just that subtle shift in the way they look at things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you can't look for someone to fix the gaps in you. And that's one of the things I see in my clients who come in. And bless them, they're so vulnerable because they're just going in that first throes of the breakup. One of the biggest human fears is being alone, right? And I was like, I never want to be alone. So they do what? They have 2 criteria for finding a new partner. 1 is they have a pulse, and 2 is they show them 1 sign of affection. And that is enough. That's a recipe for limpet mode, where they just attach themselves to that person and say, never leave me, I'm going to be okay. And that is a recipe for disaster. So yeah, if you can take some time out and actually go on a voyage of discovery of your own self identity, who you are now, because who you are now is when you're single now. So for example, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, very different to the person you are, especially when you're like 20s, 30s. So we change, and what we want, I mean, I used to love rollerblading when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 30s, late 30s, when I was getting my divorce, I tried rollerblading and I was just terrified I was going to hurt myself. It was a whole different experience. So it wasn't who I was anymore. So I had to find a new hobby. So it's about trying to figure out what makes you tick, who you are, what's at your core, but also what you need from a partner. Because what we tend to do when we're thinking about our next partner is, what do we want? Oh, I know what I want. Blonde, blue eyes, tall, dark, handsome, whatever it is. We know what we want, but what do you need? Because if you're in a relationship where it didn't work out because maybe you need someone who can express their feelings more, and your partner was very shut down, or you're the other way around. Maybe you're someone that doesn't like to talk about emotions, so you don't want to be with someone who demands that you talk about your emotions all the time. You need to find someone that matches you, because you need to be happy in a relationship. You don't want to be put under pressure to express emotions that's not something you feel comfortable doing. So you need to find someone who's okay with different ways of communicating that. So these are things that are critical, which you learn on that journey when you take time out to learn to love yourself and accept yourself for who you are, because you're great just the way you are. You don't need anything else, but you do need to understand how this works. And if you understand, then you can get the remote controls of your brain and say, right, I know that in a relationship, to increase my chances of it being successful and me feeling happy, I need to find someone that I'm truly compatible with. So I need to find someone that matches what I need, not just what I want. Like the blonde hair might be great, but actually I need someone who can sit and listen to me when I come in from work without telling me all about their day for 15 minutes and not listening to me. Whatever it is for you, you've got to figure it out. But that's really important. And it's absolutely critical for next relationships, and to get that sorted out before you start dating again. As well as, I would add to that, I do an exercise with my clients on my retreats or in my coaching clinic called How to Design Your Ideal Partner, where you look at what you need versus what you want, and you can have both, you're on the list. Also, you can come up with a maximum of 5 must not haves. So, for example, if you know your relationship broke down because, I don't know, your partner was lazy or they smoked, or, I don't know, maybe you don't want kids, whatever it is, those 5 things, they're not negotiable, they're non-negotiable, and they are absolute deal breakers. And what that gives you is, it gives you like a safety net when you're dating, because you know you're not going to get into relationships that aren't going to go anywhere in the long term, but you can make the decision yourself consciously. So, for example, take an example of someone you had on your list smoking, for example, and on the first date, they got a cigarette out and started smoking. Now, for you, you can make the decision. You know that this is not going to be a long-term relationship because it's one of your 5 massive deal breakers. So it's not going to be a long-term relationship. So then you can make the decision. Is this Miss or Mr. right now, or I'm just going to get out of it. It doesn't have to be Mr. Right or Miss Right. It could just be Mr. or Miss Right now. But if you're consciously aware that it's not going to go anywhere, you're not going to fall head over heels and get your heart broken, which is why most people don't want to start dating, because they're hurt. They don't want to get rejected. They don't want to get their heart broken. So by figuring some of these things out, you can kind of give yourself a safety net to know, look, I can go on a date and I'm not going to fall in love with the first person because I know what I want. And I know that if they show any of these signs which are totally incompatible with me, I'm out of there. Of course, it doesn't get rid of all the risks, but it massively minimises that risk of heartbreak and hopefully boost your confidence to get back out there and start dating again.
And where would you say kind of healthy boundaries come into that as well? Because surely that's kind of sort of slightly interlinked as well. So if you are kind of once you're kind of back in the dating game, so to speak, if your thing is that you, I don't know, you go out on your bike every Sunday, or you go fishing it every other Saturday or something or whatever, and you know the lady that you're seeing, it may be that she goes out with her girlfriends on a Thursday night for a couple of glasses of wine, and she does I don't know, salsa dancing on a Monday night or whatever. Is it more, do you find that when you kind of looking for that next long-term relationship, it's being more respectful of those kind of boundaries and seeing how that kind of stuff fits together in the whole jigsaw puzzle of things as well?
Well, again, it's give and take, isn't it? I don't think you can expect things. I do think honesty is really important. And I think if you're hiding things because you're worried about it, so for example, I'm not going to say I've got this fishing trip coming up, or I'm not going to say that I've got this, I'm just going to just I can't make it home tonight. You know, all that, you've got to get rid of that. You just got to get rid of it, because if they're not going to be happy for you to do it, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I don't know. No judging here. But for example, if they're like, no, I don't want you to go out, you go out all the time, and that's something that's important to you, then you know up front, this is someone that is not what I need. I need someone that's going to be okay for me to go out on a Friday night because they're self-sufficient, and they're not going to cry and say, you don't love me. They're going to say, great, I can watch The Voice, which you hate. So you go, I'm going to box set it up and watch The Voice or whatever. You know, I mean, that's what you want because that's what you need. But if you're like tiptoeing around going, oh, I don't know whether to mention that I'm going out on Friday, better not. Oh, suddenly last night, oh, something's come up. No, just be honest. If it's not going to work, you want to know that up front, early on, and then work through it. And then you decide with your boundaries. And it's up to you to maintain your boundaries, by the way, because once you let your boundaries slip, it's very difficult to put them back up. Once you start going, okay, I won't go out on Fridays, suddenly turn around and say, I'm going out on Friday, it's going to be a much bigger deal. So you need to stick to it. If that's what's important to you, you need to stick to it. And you don't need to be aggressive about it. You can say, look, do you realise this is something that's super important to me? I love it. I love going out with my friends, or I love fishing, or Sunday afternoon, I just need a bit of time before I start work again. I love you, and if I need to show you that in a different way on another time, I can. But is it okay if we do this? You know, and then you can work through it, because you're hoping that this is a compatible relationship and you're working with two rational, logical people. If you pick one of them, then you're going to find out pretty soon if they don't like that, and then you can get out. Yeah. But that's what I mean. You've got to be honest, because if you're hiding this, you know, you might not realise the person you're in a relationship with. So it's important.
Yeah. And I think that cycles quite nicely back into, that also applies to relationships where, you know, where you are trying to recover a relationship that's kind of gone awry for divorce. I see it a lot again. And the analogy I use with some of the guys I speak to is that boundaries are kind of like the gate that's been left open on a farmyard. It's very easy to leave them all open, but when you're trying to put all the animals back into the pens where they should be, it is very, very, very difficult. And what I've noticed is that in kind of in marriages, this sometimes does happen, that in order to make it work, someone's considered a boundary, the other person's considered a boundary, and all of a sudden the boundaries are kind of dropped. And then to get it back on a level playing field, you're having to kind of establish those boundaries back in again. And that is sometimes very, very difficult if they've been kind of pushed back for over a period of time, and it often causes a little bit of resistance. It finds its new level, but it does carry quite a bit of resistance as and to use that analogy, that is exactly what happens if you're trying to, you know, put animals back in a pen on a farmyard. And it's a crude analogy, but it does kind of work in people's head because they can picture how difficult that would be.
And if you're in a toxic relationship, for example, where someone's treating you badly, quite often we shift our boundaries, we let them go, or leave the gate open, as you say, because we don't like conflict. We want to avoid conflict. So we go, oh, you know what, I'll suck it up, I'll get on with it. Yeah, fine. Okay. But actually, you've got to be really clear, and especially when you're going to a second relationship, if you've been in a situation like that, you've got to realise that by leaving those gates open, you are enabling bad behaviour. If you're enabling bad behaviour, then you're responsible for creating the monster that then erupts. So, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, because sometimes in toxic relationships, you don't see it coming, or you're just trying to be caring and empathetic. And it can be, you can be taken advantage of. But actually, it's a really good lesson to learn that if you've done it once, it's very hard to shut that gate and go back. So best just to stick to your boundaries and work out what you want first. What is acceptable behaviour in a relationship? What do you need from that relationship? Do you need a bit of freedom? I have clients, male clients, who want to go cycling. I have one who lives abroad, who every Saturday he just goes off the whole day. And it works because his wife loves it, because she likes having time on her own with the baby on a Saturday. So that works super well for them. So they get on super well. But, if there was ever any conflict, he couldn't stay in that relationship if he didn't have that freedom. But it works. That doesn't work for everyone. So the key to successful relationships really comes down to picking the right person to be in the relationship with. And if you're a square peg round hole, it's just not going to work. So you've got to set the game up to win. And if you've got a chance to do it a second time round, then this is worth the education and getting that clarity to make sure that you do understand what you're doing consciously and make those right decisions.
One of the things that I think troubles a lot of guys, and I think a lot of ladies as well, is kind of, what are my children going to think of this new partner of mine, and how do I deal with that situation, because it's bringing someone into the relationship. I know that causes kind of a lot of kind of consternation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that as when you split up, when you're dating, that's for you. That's not dad with kids time. You dating, that's you time. So you need to keep that outside of the kids until you know that this is somebody that is going to, that you want to introduce to them. But also, I would hope that on your list of ideal partner, you've got to think that they're going to get on with the kids. There's somebody that has the values that would fit in well with your children, because otherwise, again, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Because if they don't get on with your children, and they're obviously a huge part of your life, that's going to cause. So that's got to be part of your filtering system of dating. And it is worrying, but if you do it in a way where you speak to your kids and you communicate. I've got a client at the moment who said, "Oh, I've got a friend popping in, and the kids were old enough, they knew, and then this person came in, and it was all just got to be honest again. Just say, look, I'm moving on, and this is something that's important to me. But you've got to pick the time, because all kids are different, all relationships are different, and I can tell you another thing." All ex-wives are different. So they're all going to react differently to the situation. So maybe you need to speak to them first and say, I've met someone, they're important to me. This is going to be really super tricky, but please can we talk about it over a coffee, because I want to introduce them to the kids. Because if you put the kids in the middle and you haven't told the mum that you're introducing a new woman, I can tell you now, I spend a lot of time mopping up the damage from those situations. So think about it beforehand. And I know it's none of her business. I know that, but ultimately you've got to put the kids first. What is best for your child? Best to make sure that everyone's okay with it. If you can't do that, and there's lots of situations where you can't go to the ex-wife because you don't have that relationship, then you have to do it with your kids in the way that only you will know. So how do you best communicate to your kids? Maybe they're different ages, different personalities. You might need to communicate separately to them. But, you're entitled to be happy. You're entitled to have a life. And if you think this is the right person and you want to bring them into that family unit, then great. But do it at the pace that matches the kid, not your pace, your child's pace. And if you can get into their psyche and work with them, it would be a lot smoother than trying to force something on them because you're ready. Because they work at different, and they may not have even thought about you meeting someone else. And you don't know the conversations that a mum may have had with them about you meeting someone else. And you've got to get through all that first. Yeah.
And kids are so matter of fact about stuff as well when they like your story from earlier on in our discussion stuff, that they are very matter of fact about things. And it sounds from what you're saying is you're kind of, when you're discussing it with your ex, it's more out of a position of courtesy rather than a position of asking for permission too, if that makes any sense.
It's not asking permission, but it's doing the right thing by the kids.
Yeah.
So it's saying, Mummy knows.
Yeah.
Obviously, it depends on the age of the kids. If they're very little, then it's a lot easier to introduce new people, and they can be friends for a while. And then, and sometimes when they're younger, you have to have the kids around more than you probably, or earlier in the relationship than you probably would want to, because they're always there or whatever. But, I just think if you can I just see the damage done when mums and dads aren't told that their kids are meeting someone else and suddenly they find out, or they find out on a text. That's going to be hard information for anyone, because if you think about it, and this is where the shoe shifting, empathetic role, where the kindness and respect and give and take comes in still. If someone was going to introduce, you're a dad, and someone said, right, your ex is suddenly going to introduce her new boyfriend, so it's a new man into their life, and then they suddenly say, oh, we met mummy's new boyfriend. For you, that's a joke for so many different reasons. One, you didn't maybe know. Two, maybe there's some sort of, you still care about them maybe, or maybe there's some unresolved issues that are going on. And also now there's the fear of, well, who is he? What, is he a nice guy? Is he not a nice guy? Is he going to be good to my kids? Is he going to care? Who is she introducing them to? Again, there's all those things. So there's ways of doing it. They're going to make it smoother for yourself, and you're going to know what they are as an adult. And there's ways that are going to make it a lot harder. And it's about taking time to think it out and just discuss it. And you might decide, sod it, I'm just going to do this. In which case, that's your choice. We're adults, you make your own decisions, but then you've got to live with the consequences. Or it might be you can't talk to your ex because she's such a nightmare that she's not going to communicate. She's going to hate anyone. So you've got to make the call, but you've got to think about it. You've got to think about it. You can't just do it. You've got to think about it from their perspective, from your perspective, and from your kids' perspective. What is going to make it easier? Because if mummy knows and mummy is okay with it, the kid's going to be more likely to accept them into their life. If mummy's ranting and raging, maybe you can't do anything about it. It's going to cause a bit of tension. So how can you dial that down?
Yeah,
that's just thinking it through.
Yeah. It's really kind of being attuned and empathetic to, again, what we touched upon back at the beginning of the conversation. What is going to be the end result of how I embark upon this situation, and how I'm going to deal with this and stuff and that. It's excellent. It's really good. We've covered such a massive amount in the time that we've been speaking. It's been a rip-roaring ride through it, and I really appreciate you coming on. Some people will think, why am I having a divorce coach on to speak about divorce on a podcast which is about dads and kind of family orientated? And the reason for that is because marriages don't always turn out as people think they're going to turn out, and they do often end. We've spoken about the statistics at the beginning of our conversation today, and I think there is a massive amount of value in knowing how to kind of negotiate this territory, because I think it's a situation where, I've seen it with friends and relatives in my own life. It is a massively lonely place to be, and it's not a place that a lot of people can relate to, and people are very well-meaning, and they say things that they think are going to make you feel better, but they don't actually make you feel better and stuff. And so I think, any help that can be given, and I would really urge anyone listening to really check out Sara's social media feed, YouTube, and particularly the Instagram videos, because there is a ton of value in there if you're going through this right now, because there's lots of very small snippets that she talks about that expand upon a lot of the things that we've dealt with in this conversation today, but they're very nuanced things that you can only understand if you've been through it yourself, and that you're dealing with people on a daily basis who are going through it, which is what Sara is. So I want to thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and for speaking to me today. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you, Sara, and find out about what you're doing?
Well, visit my website, saradavison.com. And also, Sara Davison Divorce Coach is my Instagram feed. And I do videos, like you said. So if you've got questions that are specific to you that you want me to answer, I can do a video on it. So that's, a lot of people will email me, sara@saradavison.com, with a situation. Say, please, can you just do a short video on this? And then I'll do one and post it up on Instagram. So you can get answers to your questions for free, and I'll put them up. So yeah, that's probably the best. I've got a retreat coming up as well. So if you are going through a breakup, I do breakup recovery retreats, which are 2 days immersive with me, going through all my techniques. So instead of coming to coaching sessions with me, one-on-one, you can come in a small group and we go through everything in 2 days. So that's on my website as well. So there's lots of ways that I give information. I've got 2 best-selling books as well, Uncoupling and The Split, and they're both available on Amazon. So yeah, hopefully that will help you and show you that there is life after divorce, and life can be better than it ever was before. So it's not all doom and gloom. It can be super positive too.
Excellent. I love it. And I'm going to ask you one last question before I send you on your merry way, Sara. What is the thing we talk about? Vision, action, and meaning at Guild of Dads a lot, and there's a good reason for that. What would you say is the thing that gives you the most meaning in your life?
Oh, definitely making a difference for people. Absolutely. People come into my coaching clinic and they'll be upset and devastated, or turn up for my retreats, or phone calls or whatever, and then the transformation and the hope that you can give people is it's so rewarding. I love what I do because it helps so many people. It's a fabulous job. I train people to do this too. So if you want to become a breakup and divorce coach, then I have a training program for that too. That's growing so fast. Over 50 coaches around the world now. So yeah, it's a movement. We're helping people and it's great. It feels great.
Excellent. It's really fantastic just to hear the difference that you're kind of making to people and really kind of carrying through what is just like a horrible time and taking them out the other end to really kind of grow themselves and be that person that they want to be. It's fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sara, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Bye.
I think the word divorce strikes fear into the hearts of most people on so many different levels. The reason for that is because that it has so many negative connotations, not least the aspect of having failed at something that you've set out so hard to try and make succeed. And I think no one really wants to find themselves in a position of having to get divorced. And it's extremely tough on so many levels. I've had friends and relatives that have got divorced, and I've seen the turmoil that they've gone through, both in sorting out the practical side of things, but really the effect that it has on their identity as a whole. And identity is something that was very much a theme of the conversation that I had with Sara, and how you form your own identity has a massive aspect on things, both in terms of your marriage itself and also coming out of the marriage and finding yourself going through the divorce situation. Sara brings a really fresh perspective, having been through divorce herself, and I think gives a lot of hope that there is indeed life after divorce. My key takeaways from today's conversation were that marriages can be saved, provided both of you want to put in the necessary work to change the relationship dynamic, and it can be done. There is information out there that enables people to put into place the different changes that can change the dynamic. And obviously we discussed Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, but there are a number of other different books that you can research, that you can really put some really practical steps that are helpful into action. The other takeaway was that really how the small things that you can do at the outset of your divorce can set the tone for further down the line. Certain things like getting on good terms with your spouse, making sure that you are keeping the children involved in the decision-making process and what's happening. We touched upon a number of different little tactics that you can use to try and smooth the path towards leading a independent life further on down the line. So there's a number of tactics we delved into during our conversation, but my key takeaway on that is that the small things really do make a difference in setting the tone as to how future relations are going to go forward between yourself and your spouse, and also for your children's sake. The third thing that I took away from the conversation today was really, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this, is the subject of identity, and why being fully independent in your own identity can be one of the biggest assets coming out of divorce, particularly when going into a new marriage. I think when we embark upon marriage, maybe our first marriage, I wouldn't say we change our identity, but there sometimes for a lot of people it can mean that their identity is changed, irreversibly changed. And I think a big part of coming out of a long-term relationship and going through divorce and coming out the other side is really re-engage in that relationship with yourself and being fully independent in terms of what you like, what you don't like, what interests you, what doesn't interest you, and how you want to spend your time and what you want your life to look like for you. So that was my third takeaway from our conversation with Sara. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sara. The best way to find out about her is on her website, which is saradavison.com, which is SARADAVISON, and that's .com. She's also on most of the main social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and her handle on those platforms is at Sara Davison Divorce Coach, the only exception being Twitter, which is SDD Divorce Coach. So you can check out her content on there. There's some really fantastic and useful videos on both her Instagram and YouTube channels, so I would thoroughly recommend checking those out. Her book is also available on Amazon, so you can check that out if you want to find out a bit more about that. That's Uncoupling: How to Survive and Thrive After Breakup and Divorce. So there's her book. And the only other thing that I would mention that we mentioned in this episode was the organisation called resolution.org.uk. On there you can find different lawyers in your area which are trained in how to adopt a more conciliatory approach to divorce. So like we said, that is a aspect of divorce which is very important in terms of making sure that the communications between yourself and your wife are conciliatory. So there you have it. There is all the links for Sara. So if you want to reach out to me or reach out to Sara about what we've discussed on today's episode, we'd really love to hear from you. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what questions you may have, and we would really like to find out what you thought about today's show. And as always, if you've missed any of the links that I've just mentioned, the best way to check them out is to go to www.guildofdads.com, and they are all on the tab marked episodes. If you want to hear more discussions just like this one today, the best way to do it is by subscribing on your podcast player of choice, be that iTunes, Google Podcasts or Spotify. If you subscribe, then you will get to find out the podcast episodes that are coming up each week. They'll just pop up on your podcast player of choice. So that is the best way to hear more discussions like the one today. You can drop us a rating and review. That'd be very much appreciated. But the biggest compliment that you can give to me is by just sharing this episode out, however you want to, whether that be on WhatsApp, Messenger or text. The more information that can be shared out, it's really important, as some of the information can be truly life-changing for dads that you may know. So if you can do that, that would be really fantastic and I would really appreciate it. You can get involved with the discussion on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter using the handle @GuildofDads, and check out our Facebook group to join the Guild. If you like what you hear and you want to email me, I love to hear from listeners. So ping me an email, joe@guildofdads.com. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and who you would like me to interview even. I'd love to know. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about what we're doing at Guild of Dads, then head over to www.guildofdads.com, and in the meantime, live a life of vision, action, and meaning.